Hello, good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here today. So I'm going to focus on, come back up, Milwaukee County's plan to end chronic homelessness using a housing first approach. Before I start, when I say housing first, how many of you out there have heard the term housing first? Wow, impressive. That's great. So for those of you that don't, just a little bit about housing first. When you're dealing with homelessness, housing is obviously the number one component for dealing with homelessness. It sounds obvious, but in a lot of communities around the country, people are not using housing as the main solution to homelessness. So when we're talking about housing first, this is giving somebody housing just as a right and not with preconditions of sobriety, where you're at with mental health, criminal justice background, whatever challenge you have. With housing first, we're giving somebody permanent housing without any restrictions. And I'll go through more of what that means later. But that's the biggest thing. And what we're trying to do is provide permanent housing. Corey talked about rent assistance vouchers. That's a big piece of our strategy. But again, this is providing somebody permanent housing. And for us, that's right off the street and right into permanent housing. And then we wrap services around them after the fact. So again, we offer case management to support for homeless individuals, but that's after they're in housing. A lot of our clients are dealing, probably 100% of them are dealing with mental health and substance abuse challenges. And we, again, wrap those services around completely voluntary after they're in their own apartment units. And the biggest point that I want to make is my last bullet here as far as advocacy that we can all do. We look at housing. Housing is healthcare. So I'll go over some of the data that we have in here. It's the biggest thing to take away for what I'm going to say tonight. A majority of the people we're serving are either not on benefits but are eligible once they're on Medicaid. There is an enormous cost savings to our community putting somebody into housing when they're on Medicaid. A lot of our individuals living on the street are frequenting emergency rooms, inpatient psychiatric hospitals, all those different things that are very, very expensive public service costs. If you look at investing into housing, investing into rental assistance vouchers, it dramatically reduces the overall cost of Medicaid. So that's the biggest thing I think to take out of this. So with our plan in chronic homelessness, real briefly, who is chronically homeless? We made a ton of progress in homelessness in our community, but it's important to know the definitions briefly. So when you talk about chronically homeless, who is that? These are individuals who have been homeless for a year straight or have more than 4 episodes of homelessness within 3 years. So these are HUD definitions we work on. A lot of our funding is tied to this definition, so it's important to recognize that. So when people have a home, they spend less time in hospitals, police custody, and shelters. So Milwaukee County's done a pretty big investment into housing first. As an example, the Behavioral Health Division of Milwaukee County puts $1 million into my budget in the Housing Division for the Housing First initiative. And why did they do that? Number one, it's the right thing to do. It's the mission of what we do in Department of Health and Human Services. But the return on investment year to year is almost dollar for dollar based on that investment. So that's certainly part of it as well. So impact for local emergency services. So when you look at hospitalizations, private hospitals, but also the Milwaukee County Behavioral Health Division, 100 times higher for the chronically homeless population than the regular population, 100 times. And a lot of the clients we work with are really, really hesitant to use any typical systems. They're very untrusting of police officers, sometimes outreach workers, definitely the mental health system. So it leads them to make choices that they wouldn't otherwise made if they would have had stable housing. $605 per visit for psychiatric crisis services. So when you're homeless and it's January and you have no housing options, you might use psych crisis as a housing plan. You might be suicidal. You might do whatever you have to do. Some of our clients might even choose jail than versus sleeping on the street on a particular day. The cost of Medicaid for that, when we could have been giving people housing vouchers all these years, again, it was not a good use of taxpayer funds. Emergency room visits, $1,100. A lot of our clients would also frequent private hospitals, and again, huge Medicaid costs of that when they could have been in housing. So here's a slide that is an important one and why the Behavioral Health Division gives us all the money that we do. So this is a cost savings with, was I believe our first 110 participants, and just 110 people saved $715,000 in 1 year in Medicaid costs. And that's just 100 people. So we are up since we started really focusing on housing first in my division. We've housed about 600 homeless people in a year and a half. So you take 715,000 for that first 100 people, add up to 600, and then you look at all the other organizations in Milwaukee doing this kind of housing. The cost savings is enormous, giving somebody a rent assistance voucher and then wrapping supportive services around them after the fact. So this is Crisis Mobile Team, Detox. A lot of our clients would go to Detox over and over and over again because they didn't have supportive housing. Justice system. So we do a lot of work with our criminal justice partners as well. So one of our focuses on homelessness to start was the downtown area. We had downtown businesses concerned about homelessness. So we worked with the downtown bid and the police district down there. We focused a lot of our homeless outreach efforts in downtown Milwaukee to try to help with that system. Well, here's the numbers that we found. So what typically would have been done if one of our clients was doing something in downtown, a misdemeanor activity, they might get a ticket for trespassing, public drinking, those different things. They would normally get picked up, be given a ticket. Our clients have no money. Of course, they're not going to pay their ticket. They're going to get a warrant. They're going to go to jail. So when you add up all these costs, these are the different costs. As an example, an MPD visit, and we got a grant that kind of looked at all these local numbers. $950 for a police call. And you can go on and on this slide. But if you really think about it, every one of these costs is in every single case. Because the police officers have to show up. Our client's going to spend an overnight in jail. They're going to get a public defender. The DA is going to get involved. Every single one of these charges adds up for one case. Complete waste of money. If you thought about this from a housing first perspective, getting somebody into permanent housing, giving them the services, these costs completely can go away. So how can we succeed with our plan to end chronic homelessness using housing first? Again, the biggest thing, housing subsidy. So if our country was really serious about ending homelessness, it actually is very possible. We don't have enough affordable housing, and the biggest thing for us is rent assistance vouchers. Section 8 vouchers, homeless vouchers through HUD. It's the #1 tool to end homelessness in our country. We do not have enough of those vouchers. Our clients have no income. They can't afford to live in a lot of these places. Even with Milwaukee, to be honest, housing is a little more affordable than other cities our size, but when you're living in poverty, even $700 a month is not affordable to you. Case management services, again, everything we do for services is 100% voluntary. If you're homeless, you're living on the street, and you need housing, you're in housing. If you want our services, that's great. If you don't, that's okay too. We have a couple of service providers in the room, actually. Very flexible services. You tell us what you need. If you want mental health treatment, substance abuse treatment, we'll provide that for you. If you don't, that's okay. Maybe you want bus tickets, maybe you want a job. It's completely flexible. What that has shown us is we have some of the highest housing stability rates in the nation right now. We're at about 97% of our clients remain housed. These are individuals. We had one individual homeless for 24 years. Consistently was turning down services. When you make things completely voluntary like that and get some of these basic needs met, they stay in housing, save a bunch of Medicaid money. Outreach and staffing, a lot of us provide homeless outreach directly on the street. We're trying to get to folks before they reach emergency rooms, before they reach our homeless shelters, literally going out on the street, finding individuals and taking them from the street directly into housing. Wide range of community partners. For this plan, this isn't just about housing and services, it's also working with the police department to get them to change the way that they do things. So especially in the downtown area, if they encounter homeless people, they'll call our outreach partners or call us on our cell phones and say, Joe's downtown, we don't want to arrest Joe. We'll come down there, try to intervene, get that individual in housing, and get them in services before they enter the criminal justice system. Same thing with the district attorney. They've actually done homeless outreach with our team and waived warrants on the street for individuals so they could go into our housing program instead of being arrested. So current calculations, briefly where we're at with our plan, was a 3-year plan to end chronic homelessness. We operate off of what's called a point-in-time survey. where everybody in the community goes around and literally counts homeless individuals. We do it twice a year, but the official HUD document is once a year. So we can easily do that through a database to see who's in the shelters on that particular night. We all go out with volunteers, community groups, and count individuals on the street. So that's where we started with. We were looking at a number of about 200 or so when we unveiled this in 2015. So this says a 70% reduction over the past month or so. It's more like an 80% reduction. So we are on pace to be the largest county in the nation to end chronic homelessness, which is great. Can we maintain that on our existing funding level will be the challenge moving forward. So the cost of housing first and case management, less than $30 a day. That is giving somebody a rent assistance voucher and wraparound services. $30 a day is all this costs. Again, when you look at the cost of Medicaid, again, for emergency room visits, the cost of putting somebody in jail, all these different things, it is a significant cost savings if we invested more as a society into these rental assistance programs instead of the more expensive Medicaid services. And again, all of our services are completely voluntary. So here's the slide that I'm most proud of. We've all done wonderful work. A lot of us have been doing homelessness work for 10 or 20 years. This is the point in time numbers of Milwaukee County. As you can tell, from 2011 through 2015, as much as we were doing what we were all doing, the number never changed. Everybody's doing really good work, a lot of mission-driven folks, but we weren't getting very far. When we all in our system instigated housing first and really did a focus on permanent housing, the number dropped significantly. So we also had one of the highest drops in the nation in overall homelessness of about 40%. It's using this housing first model and it's providing somebody rental subsidy and services. So that's what I have. Thank you.